I don't obey government mandates because government mandates are illegal. They are not lawful. They're not passed by a legislature and signed by someone in the executive branch of either a state or the federal government. Therefore, they are not lawful. They are a violation of the Constitution, and they are a violation, many of them, of good order or how governments should treat humanity. Okay? They are crimes against the people. They are violations against the people. We could put it that way. Now, it's often been argued that Christians are to obey these mandates because of Romans chapter 13. Well, I'm going to explain to you why that is a false argument. I have Romans 13 open here, and I'm going to show you in Romans 13 how that argument is false. Okay? Now, I took 8, count them, 8 oaths to the Constitution. 4 in the military and 4 in law enforcement. And I took those oaths saying that I would abide by and be obedient to and protect the rights that are laid out within the Constitution of the United States. I have not violated my oath, nor will I. The Constitution is the law of the land. And mandates like shutting down businesses, shutting down churches, isolating people into their homes, requiring the wearing of masks, restricting travel, all of that kind of stuff, they're illegal. They're unlawful under constitutional law. Now, I gave an oath to the Constitution, not to the health department. I gave an oath to the Constitution, not to the president. I gave an oath to uphold the Constitution, not the World Health Organization, the UN, or any other organization. My allegiance is to the Constitution. I gave an oath. That means that I stood and raised my hand and said to God and before God that I would obey the law of the land, which is the Constitution, and I would uphold the law of the land, and I would protect the law of the land, which is the United States Constitution. Now, Romans 13 requires that I keep that oath. But see, I didn't obey the last mandates. Now, I did obey those who were in church authority. I disagreed with the shutdowns of the churches. I thought that was a big mistake. I thought the churches across the country should have never have shut down, ever. I understand that fear was a big factor in it, but I think it was wrong, and we should have never done it. I will not obey any future mandates because they are a violation of my oath. Now, Romans 13 says this: let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. What are the higher powers? Well, there are two higher powers. There is the ecclesiastical higher power, which is the church authority, and there is the civil higher power, which is governmental authority. Okay? For there is no power but of God. So God has ordained that these powers exist and that they function. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resists the power, resists the ordination of God. If a police officer tries to pull you over and you fail to yield, resisting his attempt to pull you over, if you run from him, if you resist arrest, if you resist a ticket, which a ticket is not, actually a ticket is technically an arrest, but when it's an infraction, it's a very, very minor violation. But I know in California, when I was an officer, if somebody refused to sign the ticket, then they were going to jail, or they were going straight to the magistrate at that moment to face the judge. And that was required of us under the law to do that, because technically they were detained, and if they did not sign the ticket, they were telling us that they wanted to go before a magistrate immediately, and we had to do that. But the point is, if you resist the authority, then that authority has the authority from God to overcome that resistance. Okay, so that's the part that falls on our responsibility. The same is true of ecclesiastical authority. If you resist the authority of the elders in the church, the ruling elders, or whatever church government that you have, if you resist the authority of that church government in their correct and righteous implementation of the commandments of Christ, the teachings of church discipline and so forth, then you are resisting God himself. So that part is true. And that's the part that everybody emphasizes in Romans 13. I'm going to get to the part that they never emphasize and show you how there is a time when you are required to resist authority. I'm going to tell you when that time is. But he carries on in verse 3, and he says, "For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil." All right. So the requirement of God of those authorities, whether it be church authority or civil authority, governmental authority, is that they be a terror to evil, not a terror to that which is good. If they become a terror to that which is good, then that authority is to be resisted, because that authority is a rebellion against God, and that authority has declared that it is at war with God. It is not obeying the commandment of God to carry out its duties in the right way, to carry out its duties according to the commandments of God, that it be a terror to evil, that it rule righteously, that it rule justly, and if it fails to do that, it becomes the enemy of God. And when it tells us to do things that are contrary to God's law, contrary to the precepts and principles in Scripture, contrary to the commandments of Christ, contrary to our oath, then it is to be resisted. And it is to be called out. It is to be rebuked, if you will, for its acts of evil, its mandates that are antichrist, its mandates that are against God and God's authority. When they do not act within the bounds of God's authority, they lose their authority. And when we're given a choice to obey God or obey the government, and we have to make that choice that if we obey the government, we're disobeying God. If we obey God, we're disobeying the government. Then the choice is simple. We obey God, regardless of what consequences the government might bring upon us for doing so. We obey God. So with this 2030 mandate, no, that's, by the way, that's the part that they never talk about. Let me read the verse 3 one more time. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power when they're ruling righteously, when they're ruling justly? Yes, we should be fearful of their power. You know, if you're doing 100 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone, where you're endangering other people's lives, and you see that police officer turn on his lights to come after you, it would be a right thing to fear that authority and to submit to it. That's an example. It says, wilt thou not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. If you do the right thing, if you act righteously, and the government is acting unrighteously, then maintain your righteousness and let the government be the one that faces the judgment and the discipline of God. And let them be the one that has to deal with God as he brings his judgment down upon them. And there's a lot of different ways he can do that. Do that. So let's see, verse 4. For he is a minister of God to thee for good. So pastors are ministers of God to you for good. And those who are in civil authority or governmental authority who are doing their job righteously and justly, they are ministers of God as well. Ministers of God in the governmental sense. So, here's the point. I think we're going to be facing these mandates once again. It's just a prediction. It's something I think I'm seeing that's going to be coming down the line. And the reason I say that is because of the UN Agenda 2030, which is in the UN website. And they always tell us what they're going to do before they do it. It's a law of cause and effect that they believe in. They believe in karma. I don't. Karma lives down the street, I don't believe in this Eastern mystic karma. I believe in providence, which is the Christian understanding of how God operates within the universe. But they believe in this cause and effect thing, and so they believe that if they tell us ahead of time what they're going to do to us, and then they do it, that somehow they won't be held responsible when it comes to karma for doing it. It's a twisted thinking, but this is how they think. So they tell us what their plan is. And their plan is to put us in 15-minute city zones. That means that we wouldn't be able to travel more than 15 minutes away from our residence, and everything that we would need would be provided within that 15-minute zone. And it would all be controlled by the globalist oligarch rulers that would rule over us. Now, in order to get us to do that, trying to force us to do that by some kind of a military means or something, they know that would be very, very difficult. That may not work. And so there's another means that they do it. Now, we're in a warfare that is an information warfare. And so it's a different type of warfare. It's what they call a Generation 5 level warfare. It's a warfare of misinformation, a warfare of what the intelligence agencies have been using for a long time to affect a regime change and so forth in nations, and color revolutions have come out of this Gen 5 type of warfare. Well, this is what they're trying to do to us now. And so the goal is that 15 minutes city situation and depopulation. And right there on the web, if you read Klaus Schwab's books, which I've read them, he states it right there in his books. I mean, right and open, he states it, and the UN states it right and open in their websites. So this is an evil agenda. So I believe that they're going to try to use fear, once again, because they believe that it worked the first time around with the first declaration of a pandemic, the first declaration of mask wearing, of isolation in your home, the shutdowns of businesses, shutdown of churches, restriction of travel, all of that. Fear worked the first time. I believe they're going to try the same method again soon, because 2030 is around the corner. And in order to get people to voluntarily, which is what they want us to just voluntarily leave the suburbs, leave these more country areas where I'm living, and voluntarily go to the inner city and live in those 15-minute zones, because they will, by the means of news plus media equals propaganda, by the means of news media propaganda, conjure up all this fear by this declaration of a future event, whether it be a pandemic, whether it be some kind of a declaration of nuclear fallout and radiation, or whatever it might be. They will, by fear, gain cooperation from people to go into these zones where they can begin to rule over them as oligarchs. And as Klaus Schwab said, and Yuval Noah Harari has said, both of them declaring themselves to be gods, and they don't believe in, well, they say they don't believe in the God, the creator of the universe. They do. Romans 1 says they just suppress the truth and unrighteousness because they love their sin. That's the truth, and that's the reality. Using these methods and these mandates, they will, by fear, get people to do what they want them to do. Now the question is, will people resist? I will tell you right now, I will not abide by those mandates. I will not be fooled by the fear-mongering. I will not be fooled by the agenda. I've already studied it. I already know what it is. When will this occur? I don't know. My guess is sometime between now and 2030 it will occur. So they're going to try to shut us down again, I'm sure. They're going to try to isolate us, or what do you call it? Quarantine us once again. The hospitals will become a place where we can't trust again. I don't trust them now. I don't trust the medical establishment. I don't trust the pharmaceutical companies. I don't trust a whole lot of authority right now, because they are acting in a manner that is unrighteous and unjust. And so they're acting in a manner that is contrary to God's requirement and commandment of them in Romans 13. See, Romans 13 doesn't just tell us what to do, it also tells the authority above us what to do. And they are in full-blown rebellion and disobedience to God when it comes to that. And they are also, they have also violated their oath that they took before God to uphold the Constitution. And God takes oaths and vows very, very serious. And so why do we see this turmoil, basically, that we're seeing in our government and in America as a whole? Well, that's the reason. It's because they have denied him. They have violated their oaths to him and to the Constitution. Excuse me. And they've acted in an unrighteous and unjust manner. And so they are in rebellion against God, and that's why we're seeing this. So, as it comes along, I will not obey future mandates. And once again, the reason, as I close, is because they are a violation of their oath to God. It would violate my oath to God in the Constitution. They are unrighteous mandates. They're unjust mandates. They are based upon a lie. Okay? And the scripture says, thou shalt not lie. And they are used as an instrument of unrighteousness, an instrument of tyranny, and an instrument of acting in a manner where they're committing crimes against humanity. Okay? And that's why I will not obey them. And so you have to choose for yourself what you will or will not do when the second round of mandates come down upon us. I can't tell you what to do. I mean, I have a chapter in my book, The Young Person's Guide to Wisdom. If you look it up, it's on Amazon, The Young Person's Guide to Wisdom, if you want to buy it and read it. There's a chapter in my book that basically, the title is, The Only Person You Can Control Is You. I have no control over anyone else. And I struggle to have control over myself, to keep myself under good discipline and acting in a good manner. Okay? So I have no control over you. I can't tell you what to do. You have to make up your own mind, your own decision when it comes to those things. But I would just say, make these decisions based upon good reasoning. Make them based upon your relationship with God. And examine, if I obey what the government is telling me, am I disobeying God? If I obey what the government is telling me, am I violating principles of Scripture? If I obey what the government is telling me, am I violating an oath that I made to God and to uphold the Constitution or the law of the land? If any of those things are true, then my recommendation would be to disobey the mandates. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.